For, like, forever, we've looked up at the sky and dreamed of flying, right? We told stories about it, drew these wild pictures, but it was always just a dream. Until two brothers, bicycle mechanics from Ohio of all people, finally cracked the code and gave us all wings. Let's get into how they pulled it off.
So first, we're going to look at that ancient, basically impossible dream. Then, we'll get into the secret ingredient the Wright brothers figured out that nobody else did. We'll relive those first incredible 12 seconds, break down the actual science of how planes fly, and then see how that one little hop pretty much remade the entire world.
You know, the idea of flying is baked into our oldest stories, like the myth of Icarus. For centuries, you had these brilliant people sketching out ideas, thinkers like Sir George Cayley back in the 1800s, who actually designed gliders that kind of look familiar, with tails for control. But for all that dreaming, the dream itself just never got off the ground.
And here's the thing. Getting something that's heavier than air to just lift up was a massive problem. The smartest people working on it were brilliant, for sure, but they were all trying to solve a two-dimensional puzzle. See, flight, as two brothers were about to prove, is a three-dimensional game.
Which brings us to Wilbur and Orville Wright. Now, these guys weren't famous professors or rich inventors with tons of funding. Nope, they were just tinkerers. They owned a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. And the way they looked at the problem of flight was completely different from everyone else.
And their day job, that was their secret weapon. Think about it. When you ride a bike, you're not just steering with the handlebars, are you? You lean, you shift your body. You're constantly making these tiny little adjustments to stay balanced. That intuitive, three-dimensional feel for balance and control, well, that's what all the academics were missing. And the Wrights thought, hey, why can't we apply that same idea to the sky?
And that, right there, that was the big idea. See, most inventors were obsessed with two things, lift and power. They figured if they just built wings big enough and an engine strong enough, they could just brute force a machine into the air. But the Wrights knew that was just a recipe for a spectacular crash. The real secret wasn't just getting into the air. It was about staying in control once you were up there. That was everything.
This really just nails their whole approach. They actually watched birds. They saw how they'd angle their wings to bank and to turn. And while everyone else was trying to steer a flying machine like a boat with just a rudder in the back, the Wrights were trying to figure out how to roll, pitch, and yaw, how to move through the air with the grace of an actual living thing. And they weren't just guessing. They were so methodical. They started by reading everything they could, studying all the existing data on flight. But as they tested it, they found something kind of shocking. The data was wrong. Like, the fundamental numbers everyone on Earth was using for lift were just off. So what do you do when the textbook's wrong? Well, you write a new one. They built their own simple wind tunnel and spent countless hours testing hundreds of little wing shapes to create the world's first truly accurate flight data. So now they had it. They had their own reliable data, a super lightweight engine they built in their shop, and their game-changing control system. They were ready. They packed up their machine, which they called the Wright Flyer, and hauled it out to the windy, sandy beaches of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It was remote, so they had privacy, and those steady winds were just perfect for giving them a little extra lift.
Okay, so the day is December 17th, 1903, and it is cold. The wind is just biting, gusting at over 20 miles an hour. They'd actually tried a few days earlier, and it hadn't worked. But they were ready to go again. This time, it was Orville's turn to pilot.
And this is the moment. At 10:35 in the morning, pointing into that powerful wind, the Flyer lifted off the ground. It was shaky, it was wobbling up and down, but it was flying, under its own power and completely under Orville's control. For 12 seconds, it stayed in the air. It only went about 120 feet. That's actually shorter than the wingspan of a modern 747. But in those 12 seconds, they leaped across an entire ocean of impossibility.
And get this, it wasn't a fluke. They did it 3 more times that same morning. First, Wilbur went a little farther, 175 feet. Then Orville pushed it to 200 feet. And by the 4th and final flight of the day, Wilbur stayed up for almost a full minute and flew 852 feet. This wasn't luck. They had done it. They had proven their system worked. They had invented the airplane.
So how in the world did they actually pull this off? What was the secret sauce that let their machine fly when so many others just crashed and burned? Well, it all comes down to mastering 4 forces that are constantly fighting each other.
The absolute heart of their invention was what we call 3-axis control. They figured out a way for the pilot to control pitch, that's the nose going up and down, yaw, the nose swinging left and right, and roll, the wings banking from side to side. It was one single, elegant system that gave the pilot total command, and it is still the fundamental principle behind every single plane flying today.
See, every plane is in this constant tug of war. You've got thrust from the engine pushing you forward, while drag from the air is trying to slow you down. You've got lift from the wings pushing you up, while gravity is trying to pull you down. Most inventors were just stuck on that part. The absolute genius of the Wrights was mastering that fourth element, control. It was the key to taming all the other forces.
Now, their first idea for control was amazing. It was called wing warping. The pilot would actually shift their hips in a cradle, which pulled on cables that literally twisted and warped the wings just like a bird does. So cool. But it was also really complicated. Pretty soon, other inventors built on their idea and came up with hinged flaps on the back of the wings called ailerons. They did the same thing, but way more simply. And that quickly became the standard we still use.
It's honestly just incredible when you stop and think about how that one single day at Kitty Hawk completely changed everything. It rippled out over the next century and transformed human life in ways Wilbur and Orville probably couldn't have even dreamed of.
All of a sudden, distance just wasn't the same barrier. Oceans that used to take weeks to cross by boat could now be flown over in a few hours. And this wasn't just about making vacations easier. It created our global economy, it lets us get aid to people in emergencies, and it connects families and cultures in a way that was never, ever possible before.
So what did those 12 seconds lead to? Well, today, the global air travel industry is a trillion-dollar network. And that's not just the airlines, it's the whole ecosystem. It's basically the circulatory system of our entire modern world, moving people and stuff 24/7.
And it's not just people either. Think about all the things in your life that got here by plane. Your phone, life-saving medicines, fresh food from across the world. Something like 35% of all global trade, by value, travels by air.
It also totally changed what we do for fun. Today, more than half of all international tourists fly to get where they're going. The airplane didn't just build a new industry, it powered whole economies by turning faraway places into destinations we could actually visit.
So in the end, the legacy of that first little plane isn't just the machine itself. It's a story about curiosity, about having the guts to challenge what everyone else thinks is true, and about realizing that sometimes the biggest, most impossible problems are solved by focusing on one simple, elegant idea. In this case, control. The airplane absolutely made our world smaller and brought us all closer. So the real question is, what's going to do that next?